Okay, so if you ask most people what respiration means, they'll probably take a deep breath and tell you, well, it's just a fancy scientific word for breathing, right? But actually, that's one of the biggest biology misconceptions out there. I mean, sure, breathing is definitely part of the picture, but true respiration, that's a complex chemical reaction happening inside literally every living cell. From the microscopic bacteria on your skin, to a massive redwood tree, to the muscle cells pumping in your heart right now, they are all respiring. And they're doing it to release energy from glucose, not just to move air in and out of a pair of lungs.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into this incredible process of cellular respiration. To really picture this, I want you to imagine a tiny, microscopic, incredibly efficient power plant operating inside almost every single one of your cells. You know, every move you make, every single thought you have, and every beat of your heart requires a ton of energy. And yeah, that energy comes from the food we eat, but our bodies can't exactly power a muscle with a piece of a sandwich. Instead, this cellular factory has to break that food down and convert it into a highly specific, usable chemical currency.
So, here is the itinerary for our factory tour today. First, not just breathing. Second, splitting sugar. Third, the main hub. Fourth, the big payoff. Fifth, emergency backup. And we'll wrap up with number 6, the grand energy cycle.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, not just breathing.
Before we can really understand how this factory works, we have to know what product it's actually designed to manufacture. The absolute ultimate goal of this entire operation is to produce a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. We'll just call it ATP for short. You can think of ATP as the ultimate energy currency of the cell. Whenever your body needs to perform any kind of chemical or mechanical work, whether you're sprinting down the street or your brain is firing neurons to process the words I'm saying, it pays for that work using ATP. Our cellular factory's entire existence is dedicated to manufacturing as much of this currency as possible.
If we zoom out to the grand equation of aerobic respiration, it summarizes the whole factory's operation in one go. Basically, we take in C6H12O6, that's glucose, a simple sugar we get from breaking down carbs in our food, and we combine it with 6 molecules of the oxygen we breathe in. Through a really elegant series of steps, the factory processes those inputs to output 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, which we just exhale, 6 molecules of water, and of course, our ultimate prize, ATP energy.
Now, looking at the master blueprint of the operation, we can see 3 distinct stages of cellular catabolism, or breakdown. Our tour is going to take us first to the cytoplasm, that's the gel-like fluid inside the cell, for glycolysis. From there, we'll move into the mitochondria, the actual powerhouse building itself, for the citric acid cycle. And finally, we'll head down to the electron transport chain for the massive energy payout.
Moving to Section 2, Stage 1, splitting sugar. All right, let's step onto the first floor of our factory. This stage is called glycolysis, an ancient metabolic pathway that literally translates to splitting sugar, and this all happens right out in the cytoplasm. Now, like any good business, the factory has to spend some money to make money, right? So it invests 2 ATP molecules right off the bat just to get the machines running. Then, across a highly coordinated 10-step assembly line, a 6-carbon glucose molecule is systematically sliced right in half. The immediate result? We get 2 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate, a small gross profit of 4 ATP, which leaves us with a net gain of just 2 ATP, and 2 molecules of NADH. Now, I want you to picture NADH as these tiny rechargeable delivery trucks. They pick up high-energy electrons from that split sugar, load them into the back, and get ready to drive them much deeper into the factory.
Which brings us to Section 3, Stage 2, the main hub.
To reach the main floor, we cross over the membrane and finally enter the mitochondria. This is the true powerhouse of the cell, where the oxygen-dependent stages take over. But actually, before we hit the main assembly line, there's a quick prep station called pyruvate oxidation. As those 3-carbon pyruvate molecules enter the mitochondrial matrix, an enzyme complex chops off 1 carbon atom. That lost carbon is instantly released as carbon dioxide, and fun fact, this is exactly where some of that CO2 you're exhaling right now comes from. The 2-carbon fragment that's left gets attached to a helper called coenzyme A. This creates a super reactive molecule known as acetyl-CoA, which is now perfectly primed for the main assembly line.
And that assembly line is the citric acid cycle. You might also know it as the Krebs cycle, named after the scientist Hans Krebs. Think of this stage as a continuously spinning carousel right at the center of our factory floor. So our 2-carbon acetyl-CoA jumps onto the carousel, joining up with a 4-carbon molecule to form a 6-carbon citrate. As this carousel spins through its different steps, enzymes systematically dismantle the remaining carbon atoms, tossing them away as more CO2. But here's the catch. The main purpose of this spinning cycle isn't actually to spit out huge amounts of ATP. Instead, it's essentially a massive loading dock. It strips away high-energy electrons to fully load up those delivery trucks we talked about. For every original glucose molecule, this cycle yields 6 NADH trucks and 2 FADH2 trucks, which is just a slightly different brand of delivery vehicle, along with a tiny direct gain of 2 ATP. So the original sugar? It's completely gone now, exhaled away into the air, but its energy is safely packed into these tiny molecular trucks.
On to Section 4, Stage 3, the big payoff. All right, it is finally time to cash in those delivery trucks. We've arrived at the inner folded membranes of the mitochondria, called the cristae, for a process known as oxidative phosphorylation. All those fully loaded NADH and FADH2 trucks pull up to the electron transport chain and drop off their high-energy electrons. These electrons get passed through a series of proteins embedded right in the membrane, sort of like a microscopic bucket brigade. And with every step downhill, the electrons release a little bit of energy. The factory uses this energy to pump protons, hydrogen ions, straight across the membrane, creating this massive, heavily concentrated reservoir of protons on one side. It is exactly like pumping water uphill behind a giant hydroelectric dam.
Now, you might be wondering, what happens to those electrons when they finally reach the bottom of the chain? Well, this is where oxygen steps in, and its role is completely non-negotiable. Oxygen stands at the very end of the line as the final electron acceptor. It scoops up those tired, low-energy electrons, combines them with a couple of protons, and forms a completely harmless little drop of water. Guys, this is the entire reason you need to breathe. Without oxygen sitting there at the end of the line, the bucket brigade backs up, the protons stop pumping, and the entire cellular factory just grinds to a fatal halt.
So once we have that massive, bulging reservoir of pumped protons, the cell executes a process called chemiosmosis. All those trapped protons desperately want to flow back to the other side to balance out the pressure, but the membrane blocks them. Their only possible escape route is through an unbelievable molecular machine called ATP synthesize. As the protons violently rush through this enzyme channel, it physically spins. No joke, it spins exactly like a turbine inside a hydroelectric dam. It uses that mechanical, spinning kinetic energy to literally smash phosphate groups onto ADP molecules, generating massive, massive amounts of our precious ATP currency.
Let's run the final numbers here and see how this all adds up. From the initial stage of glycolysis, we netted just 2 ATP. The citric acid cycle gave us 2 more. But look at oxidative phosphorylation, the turbine stage. By cashing in all those loaded delivery trucks, that stage alone generates an additional 26 to 28 ATP. That brings our grand total to an incredibly efficient 30 or 32 ATP molecules for every single molecule of glucose we put in.
Let's move to Section 5, Emergency Backup, Fermentation.
So what happens to our powerhouse if, say, you're suddenly cut off from oxygen? Well, when the oxygen runs out, the electron transport chain backs up, and those delivery trucks have absolutely nowhere to drop their electrons. The cell has to rapidly switch to an anaerobic, meaning oxygen-free, backup plan. This backup plan is called fermentation. Its entire job is just to empty those delivery trucks so glycolysis can at least keep running and producing its tiny, steady drip of 2 ATP. For us humans, when you're sprinting hard and your muscles burn through oxygen faster than your blood can supply it, your cells switch to lactic acid fermentation. It empties the trucks, sure, but it produces lactate, which makes your muscles feel fatigued and heavy. On the flip side, tiny organisms like yeast perform alcohol fermentation. They empty their trucks and output ethanol and CO2. And humanity has actually been exploiting this exact emergency backup plan for thousands of years. It's literally the process that makes bread dough rise and puts the bubbles in champagne.
And our final stop, Section 6, the grand energy cycle.
Let's zoom all the way out from the microscopic cell now. We really need to see how our internal powerhouse connects to the entire world around us. See, cellular respiration is fundamentally linked to another massive biological process, photosynthesis. They are literally 2 sides of the exact same coin. Photosynthesis in plants takes energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and water, and it stores that solar energy by building sugars and releasing oxygen. Cellular respiration? It does the exact reverse. It takes those built-up sugars and oxygen, breaks them down to release the stored energy, and produces carbon dioxide and water as waste.
The waste of one is the raw material for the other. I mean, think about how beautiful that is. It is a continuous, perfectly balanced cycle of energy and matter. Every single breath of oxygen you take and every bite of food you eat was assembled by a plant somewhere using the power of the sun. And every breath of carbon dioxide you exhale is eagerly gathered up by a leaf to begin the whole cycle all over again. We honestly owe our very existence, our very breath, to photosynthetic organisms.
We've just toured this absolute marvel of biological engineering. We watched the mitochondria split sugars, spin these crazy molecular carousels, and drive actual nanoturbines just to keep you alive. But remember, this is just one single process. It leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to ponder. What other invisible, highly efficient cellular factories are working inside you right now, completely unnoticed, keeping the amazing machine of your body running? Keep wondering, keep exploring, and I will see you in the next explainer.